All information given in this episode is for educational purposes and should not be tried prior to consulting a licensed physician and or certified state or accrediting bodies. We encourage all listeners to research, talk, and make all inquiries to all of the important professionals and governing bodies before acting on any information heard on the De La Fit podcast. Any action taken by any listener is done by and under their own omission and action, whether conscious to the results positive or not.
Tuned in to the De La Fit podcasts, 360 degrees of holistic fitness and health, all in one podcast.
Salutations and proclamations. It is I, it is you, it is us, it is we. Together we make up the digital family that is the De La Fit podcast. I'm your host, Philly's #1 son, aka the Body Alchemist, Sun Moon Bay, bringing you another podcast excursion. Welcome everybody back to the 360 degrees of holistic fitness and health. I am so excited to be back with all of you. First things first, I just want to apologize to everybody for last week's show or lack of show. We had some technical difficulties. I'm just going to be 100% honest with you. For everybody that listens to the podcast, in the spirit of truth and everything that's going on, I do this podcast. I also work. I have a job or a few jobs. I wear a few different hats. So I work dealing with my consulting, my fitness consulting, as well as working with the library as a physical literacy specialist for everybody out there that tunes in. I think I've said that a few times. And also I am taking care of my parents. My parents are 80 and 70. So as a result of the pandemic and things like that, and me not wanting them to have to be out in the public and do certain things, I wear a lot of hats, which means helping them with a tremendous amount of things, whether it's scheduling doctor's appointments or working on things dealing with the house, running errands, things of that nature, that you just naturally have to do with parents of a certain age that needs assistance. So that's a lot of what I do. If I'm not doing that, I'm working. And if I'm not working, I'm working. And if I'm not working, I'm doing this podcast. So with that being said, I had an immense amount of things that just took place. And to cap it all off, had issues with uploading the video after all of these things. Just could not get the video uploaded. So it seemed like everything was coming at once and just couldn't do it. So deeply apologize to everybody, but in the spirit of realness and just being point blank, truthful, just a whole lot of shit that happened. So with that being said, we're going to have a great show. We are going to be joined with a special guest, Melanie Weller. Melanie is the foremost expert on a specific nerve called the vagus nerve, and she's going to be going into why we might want to explore our vagus nerve, be worked on, and have it what is the word? Rehabilitated within our bodies. I hope that's the best word, and how it can help our general health overall. Also, she deals with health in a very different manner. She comes with a plethora of different credentials. She is a physical trainer. She has went to school and has a number of different letters behind her name. Overall, she is a gracious and beautiful, energetic human being who is devoting herself to helping individuals rid themselves of physical pain through her knowledge. So it's going to be an excellent show. And I just can't wait for you all to hear her speak. Before we get into that, just going to talk about some of the events that's been going on as of recent. And there's so much. I'm going to tell you all, honestly, there's just so much that's going on. It's hard to keep up. And being busy in my normal, everyday life is hard enough. But to deal with all of the different changes that's going on within society and the different moments, it takes a lot. And I find myself having to take a breath and step back at times. And sometimes for real, just give myself a mental break, a mental health break. It's just a lot that's going on out there. I know many people have been paying attention to what's going on with the stock market. Tremendous amount of things going on with the stock market. I know many of you may or may not be following, but there was a big boom dealing with this AMC, purchasing of stocks dealing with AMC, and the stock soared up as high as possible. And then dealing with this situation with GameStop. But I'm looking at the media, and it's the funny thing, and you can call me a conspiracy theorist or whatever it is, but you know what? The thing that I've been reading, and I do a lot of independent research and reading, I just don't follow what the media, and when I say media, I want to be very specific for all of those individuals out there that need extra clarification. I'm talking about a lot of the news markets that are out there. I think in the last year alone, many of us saw that there are extremely different sides or different news entities that have their own side, what they promote, whether it's an extreme leftist side, an extreme right side. There's very few that actually are in the middle that are just giving 100% facts. One of the news options that I choose outside of just reading and trying to research on my own, which I encourage anybody to do, is I watch News Nation. News Nation is pretty good. I kind of like a lot of the things that they are doing. But I watch world news, and I don't mean the world news local to the United States. I mean, I tend to watch the news from other countries just because what I feel is that a lot of the times it's not as biased because they're not as connected, at least from where I see it. So I've just been paying attention to that and just trying to focus, but paying attention to what's going on with this and seeing how things are going. And it seems as though there has been a shift. And I was talking about this with my older brother. There is definitely a mental shift, and it's hitting all industries. It's hitting everything. It's hitting how we interact with each other as human beings. It's hitting how we do business. It's hitting every portion of our lives. And there's this mental shift is really the I like to call an awakening of mindfulness and truth. And the fact of, I think for a long time, many of us have gone along and with this mentality of that unless you are given entrance to certain societies and industries, you'll never really know what's going on. And there's been talk about the 99% and, the 1% and all these things, which I do believe is true. Whether you see it in a positive or negative, that's just the truth. I mean, there is always going to be a large amount of people that don't know versus the small amount, the 5% and the 1%, or however you want to say it, that do know what's truly going on. That's the nature of power or running of certain things. But I say all this to say the fact that I feel that there is a shift taking place, and the shift that's taking place is that people are starting to wake up and take responsibility for their own happiness, their own lifestyle. We're not leaving it in the hands of other individuals. And I think as we do that, we're starting to collectively find other like-minded individuals. We might have different political ideologies. We might come from different backgrounds, but we're starting on our own to really come together and really think of things in a, how can I make my life, my family's life better? And when you're doing that, you will find like-minded people. And what I see that comes from that is we start to each one teach one. And that's what I really think was taking place dealing with this whole stock market thing. Now, I know many people in the media all have their says, and everybody's like, oh man, the media is saying that it's volatile, and that, you know, I've heard certain people within the industry respond to what took place as a Ponzi scam and all these things. But in truth, what you really see is, again, what I see is it's a collection of individuals, and not so much of a collection of people who decided we're all going to go in the same direction. I think it's a collection of individuals that basically sat down and just shared with each other the information that they have come up with. And in researching, because the truth of it is that as much as many people out there want to talk about retail investors and all this and that, they don't really know what they're doing, and buy, you know, and they're going to ruin their lives, and, you know, we have to protect them. The truth of it is that a lot of the information is already out there, and it's out there for us to study. And what I find, and I think the general populace, individuals who are trying to make their lives better for themselves and others close to them, are starting to find out is that truly the information is out there. But the biggest thing is that they're starting to find out is that the information works. And once they find out that it works, you have entities that are like, oh no, they know it works, and they know this, they're learning the secrets, which pretty much changes to the fact of we can't take advantage of them anymore. And that's with any industry. Many of the listeners out there, you might be tuning in or you might be listening, and you're like, but I always hear this show, De La Fit, and, I thought you're a fitness show. We are a fitness show. And what I'm talking about is fitness. Fitness, again, as I always say, is not just protein shakes and barbell plates. It is everything. So to bring it home, it's the same thing with the fitness industry. And I know many of my other my brother and sister trainers out there, and my colleagues out there be like, wait, what are you saying, man? What are you doing? The truth of it is that fitness, in order to get fit, the information is out there. The information is out there. You just have to read it, figure it out, and understand. Now, I'm going to be very honest with all of you out there right now at this very moment. I decided to get my certifications because I wanted to have backing. I wanted to have an entity behind me that could actually say, that I could stand with. But the truth of it is that I was working out and reading and researching and building strength on my own long before I went to school for it. So I really didn't have to do it, but I decided to do it because I wanted the information. I wanted to learn more. And I'm not knocking anybody else that goes out and gets certified or whatever. I'm just saying I wanted to learn more. But I also know that in this society that I live in, you need certain types of certification. They don't just want to go by what you're doing. They want to go by who's backing you. No matter how you look, no matter how much weight you can, lift. Yeah, we can see it. But, and I'm going to say this. I'm lucky to have good mentors. And in speaking to some of my mentors, I have found, and as well as my own research, that a lot of the information is already out there. One of my mentors, we used to talk about this all the time. He was like, my job is to train you so that you don't need me, so that you'll know how to take care of your own body. And I know this from our conversations. The trainer's trainer, Jeffrey Snyder, I'm shouting you out. He would always say this: there's no one perfect way to get your body fit and muscular. There are so many different ways that you can add stimuli to your body in order to get it strong. Whether it's calisthenics, whether it's weightlifting, whether it's the type of weightlifting you're doing, it doesn't matter. What you have to basically understand is how to stimulate the body, how to allow the body to properly recover, and get the best nutrients in your body so that your body can grow and heal itself. Because that's basically what you're doing. When you're working out, you are tearing down muscle fibers or scarring them or lightly, or however you want to explain it. And then they're healing over. So it's growing stronger and stronger. It's almost like a callus. It grows stronger and stronger, thicker and thicker, in order to protect the hand. Well, your muscles are growing stronger and stronger so that they can keep the body healthy. The body, it knows this body's going to meet some aggression, or some type of resistance. So it's getting stronger in order to overcome the resistance. And that's the same thing that humanity is starting to come to understand. I think there's an awakening taking place, whether it's in the stock market, whether it's in entertainment, whether it's in the health industry. Human beings are starting to realize, they're starting to come to this resolution themselves that we are in charge of our own happiness. We are. We're not just going to stand by and be fed. And when you realize that, when you take your purpose in your own hands, what takes place is that not only does a new world open up to you, but I think the biggest thing that takes place is that you start to see who is in what position, who is controlling what, and what they are doing with the control that they have. And it's one of the biggest things I think that we as a culture in the West are starting to wake up to, slowly but surely, because it's been taking place for years. And if you look at the history, people have been talking about a lot of different things for years. Some of it goes under what do they call that? What is that term? Conspiracy. Some of it is dealing with actual experience. But I think the biggest thing is that what we're learning is that, hey, the truth, be it stranger than fiction, is out there, and it works when you apply it, when you understand, and when you use it yourself. When you truly understand it yourself. You know, I've had the pleasure to talk to some of the most advanced athletes out there on this show and in private. And one thing I found out, and I love to hear them say, is the fact of, the things I do is not impossible. Some of them have, quote unquote, what they call natural ability. And some of them work very hard to develop that ability. But some of the things that I've been told is basically a lot of common things they say is that, I take my time and I learned how to work. I learned how my body worked. I learned what worked for me. And then I learned what I needed to know. I studied and I researched, and then I put that into effect. And I try to build myself up. This is the athletes telling me this. I try to strengthen every muscle, not just all my physical muscles, every muscle, my mental muscle, my spiritual muscle, my everything. And some of the most successful athletes, some of the most successful people are the ones who are able to do this. And I think that's the potential that we as a culture, we as a race of human beings have at our disposal. I think we are getting to that point where we're starting to ask the question of, what do I need to do? What do I need to do for my happiness, for my real happiness, for the things that I need to take care of? What do I need to do to take care of me? And in doing that, we're researching, and again, we're starting to connect with others, and we're learning that the I is really a we. We're strongest when we come together. Anyway, that's my little soliloquy for the beginning of the show. We're going to get into this interview with Melanie Weller. This is going to be such a great interview. I want to remind everybody that this is an interview that we conducted early in 2020. So much was going on that we were in the middle of preparing for the Roku channel. We were in the middle of going from our studio, going back to our studio, and then coming out of the studio because of all the changes and the closures and all these things. So I think we shot this one in our home at this time. And I just had a great interview. So I hope all of you enjoy this. We're going to go to the interview that I had with Melanie Weller. I'm tongue tied. I need a sip of water, everybody. I have a big thing of water right here. But we're going to go to that interview in just a few moments after these messages from our sponsors.
De La Fit Podcast is sponsored by Mountain Made CBD. Mountain Made is changing the CBD game by offering a line of high-dose CBD tablets at an affordable price. Their products are THC-free and third-party tested for accuracy, cleanliness, and potency. Their products, which ship nationwide, include Build for CBD saturation, Boost for precision titration, Recovery for rest and rehab. With 9 years experience in hemp and fitness, Mountain Made's founders are focused on creating a quality product to help those who live an activated lifestyle. Check out www.mountainmade.life to find out more about how their products can help you crush life.
What's going on, everybody? It's Philly's #1 son. Listen, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's a creation tool that allows you how to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a stunning podcast in one place. So listen, if you want to be like me and have your own podcast, go to anchor.com. That's anchor.com. Welcome back, everybody, to the 360 degrees of holistic fitness and health that is the De La Fit podcast. My guest for today is Melanie Weller. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
You did.
Awesome. So Melanie has a specific skill talent that I thought was just amazing. And I wanted to have her come on the show just because when I read it, I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So let me just give all of you a quick background on Melanie. You're a physical therapist, board certified orthopedic clinical specialist, certified athletic trainer, and certified exercise expert for aging adults. If I'm correct, you are the foremost or have the foremost knowledge when it comes to a specific nerve in our body called the vagus nerve. Am I correct?
Yes, the vagus nerve. Yes.
The vagus
nerve. Kind of like
nerve.
Las Vegas, but it's spelled differently. It's VAGUS.
Understood. Yeah, you wouldn't believe I went on Google and practiced saying this 3 times. So, but before we get into your expertise, tell us a little bit about yourself. What started you on this health journey?
Well, that's a great question, and nobody's asked me that yet in all of my podcast interviews. So I'm really happy to tell that. I grew up playing softball, like youth softball. I don't remember that I played t-ball. My brother, that's 4 years younger than I am, played minor league baseball and coached for the San Francisco Giants for a while. So there was a lot of baseball in my house, a lot of athletics in my house growing up. And I swam competitively with very high level, like Olympic level swimmers. I was not that level, but I swam year round competitively with a team that trained a lot of very competitive swimmers. And when I went to college, I wasn't quite competitive enough fast enough to swim on the swim team where I went to college. And so I just decided to find out what life was like outside of the water. Because when you swim, you practice often 7 or 8 times a week. You swim early in the morning and you swim in the afternoon, and it was a lot. So I just decided to find out what life was like outside of that. And I ended up getting really interested in athletic training. And I really wanted to graduate from college with a practical skill. And what interested me most was the sports medicine department. I went to the University of Virginia undergraduate. So I was a student athletic trainer from the time I was a first-year freshman all the way through my senior year. And just really, really loved the I think the puzzle of when health doesn't go well, like that was really the most interesting thing to me, is like, how do you decode this, and how do you fix this, and and how do injuries happen, and then how do you fix them? And so that has been, I suppose my primary interest in health, or like I love that puzzle, that problem solving within that. And in hindsight, I will tell you that my journey in treating the vagus nerve has really been all about treating my own vagus nerve. Okay. And I think on a spiritual, metaphysical level, we all do the thing that we need most to heal ourselves.
True.
And so, for me, this has really been about mastering myself, mastering, trying to get the thing that I need the most. And, and often we receive that by giving it to others.
So tell us, why the vagus nerve? Why, of all the parts of the body?
Of all the parts of the body, yeah. Well, my initial exposure to treating the vagus nerve was decompressing it at the base of the skull. And your vagus nerve goes all the way from your brainstem down to your pelvis.
Okay.
And it innervates your vocal cords, your heart, and your digestive system. In your digestive system, it's involved in bile secretion and digestive enzyme secretion and nutrient and water absorption. And it also innervates the muscles that help move the food through our digestive systems. Your vagus nerve is in almost all of your organs, except it's not in your adrenal glands. And it sends information from your organs up to your brain. As a physical therapist, my interest in it was that it uses the same neurotransmitter that your muscles do. And so you get these really beautiful musculoskeletal system responses when you treat it. So, for example, I would say maybe 15 years ago or so, I was working in a clinic, and I had a group of middle-aged women that had knee pain, and specifically patellofemoral pain. And it's like, and when you work in a PT clinic, sometimes it's like, oh, it's knee season this week, or, and the next week it's shoulder week. You get people, for whatever strange reason, you get people in diagnostic batches sometimes. And so I had this group of women with knee problems, and I had this technique that I'd used for a long time to release the anterior femoral cutaneous nerve, and it worked great for fixing these kneecap problems. And it was suddenly like it stopped working altogether. And I was really frustrated. I was like, these people should be getting better, and I don't know what I'm missing. And so I kind of wiped the slate clean and reevaluated them and did more of a head to toe assessment. And what I discovered is that they were all tight at the base of their skull, that their vagus nerve was compressed at the base of their skull, that their cranial bones weren't moving properly, and their upper necks were very tight. And in the sense that have treated the kneecap problem as a nerve problem for many years, that it's, that releasing the nerve on the front of the thigh will give the kneecap a lot more mobility. I thought, well, the nervous system must be stuck more somewhere else if treating it here isn't working. There's more protection in the system happening somewhere else that it's locking down. And then when I treated everybody's base of the skull, they all started getting better. And so, over the years, just through lots of failure and really looking, really wanting to know what the deeper problem is, I discovered just how powerful treating the vagus nerve is and where it gets compressed. And we know now, like I've been talking about this for a long time, and it's so exciting to see the media really catch up with the vagus nerve. There's a lot of interest in it now. There's telesummits and things like that on the vagus nerve now. So it's really exciting to see it getting so much more notoriety and traction. We know through research that trauma always affects the voice and the breath. And your vocal cords and your diaphragm are horizontally oriented in your body. So, they go so they're in what you would call the transverse plane, so that they're, they go horizontally across, and like our pelvic floors go horizontally across as well. And certainly in severe trauma, people will lose bladder control, for example, too. And so your vagus nerve will get compressed where you have horizontal structures, and nobody gets stressed or traumatized and has really great arm swing when they walk. We all, when we're stressed or traumatized, rotation's the first thing that we give up. Right.
Tensing up. That.
Absolutely. And, the problem with that, and it's a great in the moment strategy. It's just not a great long-term strategy. You don't want to keep that strategy going. And when, for example, in all humans, the right side of the diaphragm has more muscle mass than the left. So theoretically, the right side will always win. Your liver's over there, and your liver's much bigger than you think it is. And so your body just lays down more tissue on that side. And so I see a lot of people that are in right-sided diaphragm dysfunction, that they'll be kind of locked down and their right shoulder will be low. They're a little bit right rotated. It's much more common to be tight on the right side with that. But the earth below us and the solar system above us rotate the opposite direction. And so when we're locked down into this position and we're not rotating, I look at it as being out of alignment on a much bigger scale. And that the thing that I noticed in treating patients over the years, and I really ended up very early in my career treating people that had not had success in other places, that I realized what was happening inside their body was very metaphorical for what was happening outside of their body. As a physical therapist, you spend a lot of time with people, so you really get to hear their stories, and they'll tell you about their personal lives, and the same things that were happening inside of their body were happening outside of their body. And so, and I guess through that, I discovered really my superpower is in helping people with really those spiritual and stress-related underpinnings of the physical dysfunction. And combining that then with your vagus nerve, that's your big stress-mediating nerve, and it also mediates inflammation, which is in my physical therapy career is obviously a big, thing, with people treating people that are injured, that you want to help them manage their inflammation as best that they can. And your vagus nerve mediates pleasure. The research around it is amazing. In the research, they'll use vagus nerve stimulation on it, and with the electrical stimulation on the vagus nerve, it reverses the mitochondrial defects in the cells that go with ischemic heart disease. And it will reverse insulin resistance in diabetics. It remaps your brain. When you pair it with the stimulus, it remaps your brain at the highest levels. And so there's just the research is very, very broad. And when your vagus nerve is functioning well, things get better. How well your vagus nerve functions predicts how long people with pancreatic cancer will live. In women with complete spinal cord injuries, they can achieve orgasm with vagus nerve stimulation at the cervix. And neurosurgeons for very complex situations like seizures in some chronic pain situations, will implant a vagus nerve stimulator in the neck, usually at the level of the neck, just because that's where it's most accessible. And those patients get a lot of success with that too, when they're very complicated cases. And so your vagus nerve is sort of the game that I've played with over the years in treating people is what 1, 2, or 3 things can I do that make 10, 20, or 30 things better? Because when you get someone that's been around the block a few times and they haven't gotten better, and I say this in the most loving way, that they're really biomechanical train wrecks, that they have, their joints are not working properly head to toe, and they have no shock absorption. And whatever part is giving them pain is just taking a beating for all of the other stuff that's not
compensating in
correctly.
sense.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. It's just compensating. They've run out of compensatory strategies, really, and that's why they have pain.
I have a question to ask you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you said something that I thought was really interesting. You said many of the patients that you were working with had a tenseness, if I'm correct, around the vagus nerve. So what did you discover, or did you discover what was the common denominator when it came to that tenseness that formed it? I know a lot of us we're at our computers and, we're on our phones. Is it something similar to that, or?
Well, it can be. I mean, the postural and habitual stuff is definitely a big part of it, and that's, but, for me, because I saw the people that had all of that intervention and it didn't work.
Got you.
For them, I went a little bit deeper, and there are, like, having, there are, I don't want to minimize how important and how powerful those pieces are, because they really, really are. But for example, when, for somebody that is expressing a lot of tightness, say at the base of the skull or in the neck, I would say that very often their heroics and their desires are at odds with each other, and like they're trying to be the hero in somebody else's story, or they don't really, or they're doing something in life that they really don't want to do. They're living this life that they really don't desire, and that manifests up at the neck. So your vagus nerve is really the bridge between your story and your body, and this is my favorite thing to work with people, because story lives in the body in very specific ways.
Hey everyone, we hope that you're enjoying the interview thus far. We'd just like to take some quick time out to remind everybody to like, follow, share, and subscribe. With every like, follow, share, and subscription, it helps the De La Fit podcast to grow. And the more we grow, the more information we can bring to you, the listener. So please, take some time out, like, follow, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
And the easiest way to understand this is through Western astrology.
Okay.
So the ventricles in your brain, well, I'll back up for a second. So first, mythology was a way of scientific writing. You know, in the old days, like they understood the cosmology very well. So for example, the Egyptian myth of Isis and Osiris, the numbers of the Earth's precessional cycle in it. And so the story was a way they communicated the cosmology. Okay. And so, and then what I ran into just in my own, I'll say in the midst of my midlife crisis/spiritual awakening, that the ventricles of your brain look just like the ram's horns in Aries, and in astrology, Aries rules the head. And the way your hyoid bone in your throat sits on top of your larynx looks just like the symbol for Taurus, and Taurus rules the throat. And your aortic arch is the same shape as the symbol for Leo, and Leo rules the heart. And it works this way the whole way through the body. And so you can use the story to really help, to help uncover the underpinnings of the stress, what's really driving this stress on a deeper level. And I've also turned it into a form of energy medicine, because I think this is, or what I found is that this is just literally the way the cosmos is coded into us. There are even structures within our cells that are the same shape as the zodiac constellations.
That's true.
So these patterns are just really, like they're everywhere. And the Earth's at about a 23.5 degree tilt, and the vagus nerve exits the base of the skull 23.5 degrees from where the spinal cord does. Normal rotation between your first and second cervical vertebrae is 47 degrees to each side, which is twice 23.5. And there's also 40 Earth orients towards over thousands of years, and the anterior cruciate ligament sits at a 47 degree angle on average. And so there's these critical angles in the body that if they're not right, you are less likely to feel right, because you are literally a fractal of the Earth and a fractal of the cosmos. And if you can't, if those angles are off, it makes it more difficult to synchronize with the bigger picture.
So it seems as though, from what I'm gathering of your work, it's very intuitive. It's extremely intuitive, and it works. First, I would say maybe emotionally and spiritually, and then going into the physical. Yeah,
I go back and forth. Sometimes I start with the physical, and sometimes I start with the spiritual. I will tell you that my experience is that when you treat somebody's physical body, sometimes their story changes, but when you treat somebody's story, the physical body always changes. And
Very
the
true.
difference between acute, subacute pain and chronic pain is that chronic pain gets locked into the limbic system, which is where our emotions are. And you have to have an emotional key to get it out of there. The leading pain science experts will tell you that they love it when somebody cries or gets angry when they explain their pain to them, because they know that they're going to get better. It's the people with a flat affect that they worry about. And as humans, we connect much more with story than we do with process. And the research around the neuroscience of story is just fascinating. It evokes all the really good hormones about our oxytocin. It helps us feel more connected with each other. And we see ourselves in these characters, and we are able to kind of vicariously heal ourselves through that as well.
You said something interesting, because I recently had a conversation with it was actually my sister. She's always been very big on the fact of allowing her emotions and getting to that point where she could cry, and in sort of a very holistic and cathartic way of kind of cleaning. She would say cleansing herself. But I think it's really interesting because, guys, we don't do that. So I'm curious, for a person who has your expertise, what do you see where it comes with the vagus nerve and a lot of men versus a lot of women?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm really good at making people cry. No matter what.
Okay.
My clientele is more heavy. I don't find that,
Melanie,
that sometimes they're...
I actually missed that. You froze for a second.
I froze for a second. Okay. I'll say that men tend to be a little less flexible in general. I think that, but women on the other side are sometimes way too flexible, that they're like, because they've been the emotional contortionist or the doormat in their lives. and that people will measure, like the doctors or physical therapists or whatever will measure their range of motion and go, oh, you're fine. There's nothing wrong. You can move everything. But you have to have a really sharp eye to pick up how they're compensating, because they are just masterful at it, beyond, conventional terms. They're just super, super clever with it, and not intentionally. That's just
right.
That our bodies are super clever. But I think that I will say probably the biggest difference with men is that that I see is that men tend to really be restricted on the backside of their hearts more than women, I would say, or that's often a primary problem for them. Whereas women, I find it sits a little bit more in the breath, like at the diaphragm or at the base of the skull, and that's just kind of a general thing, but it's, when you say, but we're all,
when you say the backside, so give me something, or for the listeners and the people who will be watching.
The problems.
Yeah.
With rib cage mechanics in general, or one of the common issues that comes up is that when people breathe, they'll breathe too much on the front side of their ribs and not move at all on the back side. Okay. So, and the vagus nerve gets compressed towards the backside of the heart and backside of the chest. And we store inflammation on the backside of our hearts, and a lot of, as we get older, people get really tight in that upper back area. And certainly desk work in general will just make you don't have to be old to get tight right in your upper back in that way. One of the most powerful things that you can do is to inhale into the backside of your heart. And on my website, if you sign up for the email list, it sends you a free vagus nerve decompression course that takes you through every level within the body. And I have people do that exercise with the backside of the heart in a specific way, with their right hand on their left shoulder and their left hand behind their back, if you can get into that position comfortably. And if not, you can just imagine it or get as close as you comfortably can, because none of this should be painful. And then I use a Fibonacci sequence breathing pattern and have people inhale for a count of 5 into the backside of their heart, hold for a count of 8, and exhale like they're blowing up a balloon or blowing out a candle for a count of 13, or as long as they can. And if that's too long, I sometimes back down and have them do 3, 5, 8, but I like to push the longer breath times as much as possible. But that inhaling into the backside of your heart is incredibly powerful at changing your whole system. And I think it, people with heart disease get really tight on the backside of their upper backs as well. And it ties into my favorite piece of wisdom, which is from a tribe in the Andes Mountains. And they say that your future is behind you, propelling you forward. And your past is in front of you, waiting for you to make peace with it and clear your way. And I love that so much. And I think that's really, to me, that it just, it always gives me goosebumps every time I say it. I think it's the truest thing about how time is oriented relative to our physical bodies. And I love the idea that your future has your back. You don't have to go out and chase it. Right. But it's really kind of about leaning into it and being supported and allowing yourself to be supported.
That you make it sound so interesting, because again, when I started reading your bio and your fact sheet, I was like, wow. And I've heard information about the vagus nerve, and what I was reading at the time, it was really about the person who was putting the information together was more talking about diaphragmic breathing. And the relationship that the two have together. What is your vision for transforming health on a collective level?
I love this question. So my vision is one, that decompressing your vagus nerve becomes basic public health information, like brushing your teeth. This is just, that it just becomes that commonplace. I also coach a lot of entrepreneurs and business people in looking at their business in the context of a human body and the vagus nerve, and to see where their business is compressed, to see where their leadership is compressed, and use a lot of these same techniques to improve their performance. And my dream is to really rehabilitate public health, and really transform public health. Because because the vagus nerve makes so many things better when it's optimized, that if we had our businesses and our schools and our politics and our healthcare if they ran in a model of the vagus nerve, I think we would all organically start to be healthier.
I agree. I really do.
And I think that, and there's so many interesting pieces of this, like, and even like, tying in the astrology as well, that, for example, Libra rules the kidneys, and Libra's symbol is a set of scales. And your kidneys sit in your low back, very much like a set of scales. They look like that. And scales to us also represent justice. And in the United States, at least, the populations with the highest levels of kidney disease have the highest levels of social injustice. And so we really embody this on a very deep level. We embody the logos. Like, I love talking about how symbols live within the body. Like CNN's logo looks like our DNA, and NBC's logo kind of sits nicely in the head because we have a bird-shaped bone in our in our heads, and FedEx's logo sits in the spine really well because your spine is kind of shaped like an arrow. It's got your sacrum is pointed at the bottom, and so you can really look at country logos, like national seals, as well as corporate logos and whatnot, and to see how they sit in the body, and do they distort our energy, or do they really optimize it? Like we could, where we could do this in a really, where it could really open us up to greater possibilities.
I'm curious, and I asked many of my guests this. What is your opinion on westernized medicine, where it comes to what you're doing? Because to me, it's very holistic. It makes a lot of sense, because as it is inside, it is outside. As it is outside, is inside. It seems to me, and this is just an opinion, that we in the Western part of the world like to, how do I say, inverse or flip things, or as my niece would say, they would, when they were in school, they would have backwards day. So yes was no and no was yes. So why does it seem that this is the way our medicine works here?
Well, I think one, I will say medicine does many amazing things, and that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater in that. I think the challenge lies in that, like, acute medicine is very good at treating your story. Like, you have a heart attack, they restart your heart. You break your leg, they set your bone. Like, there's this very clear cause and effect. They're really good at treating your story in an acute, emergent way. Right. Chronic care medicine, that strategy in chronic care medicine does not work so well.
Hey, you, with the earbuds in their ear. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? When I was trying to get my podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. How do I record an episode? How do I get my show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places people like to listen? How do I make money from my podcast? The answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors too, so you can get paid to podcasts. I like to upload my episodes directly to the app and then promote. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast, make money doing it. Go to anchor.fm/start to join me in the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast.
And that's really where, but they're still trying to apply this acute strategy to a chronic situation. And chronic situations, all have, they're all complex in nature. I mean, we're all complex in different ways, and this information doesn't just apply to when you have a physical pain or injury, different life situations. It's the same, the same story-based, right. Stress-based things apply. Medically, we know that stress is the root of all disease.
Yes.
But we don't really talk about what stress is, or we'll say, oh, it's when your vagus nerve isn't, firing as well, or the gold standard measure for your vagus nerve is called heart rate variability. So it might mean that you have an erratic heart rate variability, and they'll say go meditate or exercise, and all those things are absolutely true. They do help, and that you have to eat well too.
Exactly.
A healthy diet is important in that, but we don't really get into more of the, like I was talking earlier, like, are you being the hero in somebody else's story? Do you really know what you desire? Are your emotions at odds with your adaptability? Like, are you somebody's doormat, or are you so rigid that you that you aren't feeling what's happening down, that you're really shut down? And like, are you really what is your operating point? Are you really operating from your authentic self, or are you being heart-centered? Might be the way that you could frame that too. And is your operating point and your practices, like, are they in sync, or are they at odds with each other? And so you can really work down, we don't get into those nuances of it. And we literally live these myths and these stories.
Very true.
Very much so. True. Like, I love talking about the Isis-Osiris myth because it, I think, is the most widely applicable story that we all relate to. And I'll give you just a quick summary of how that went. So Osiris was the king of Egypt, mm-hmm. and Isis was his wife, and Set was his brother. And Set was jealous of Osiris being the king. And so he tricked Osiris into laying down in a bejeweled coffin, had his soldiers shut the lid, nail it, carry it to the Nile River, and send him downstream to his death. Isis found out about this, went and found Osiris, took him to a cave, brought him back to life. And then Set found out about it and was furious. And so Set found Osiris and chopped Osiris into pieces and scattered his pieces down the Nile River. Isis again found out about this. She went and found all of his pieces. She was able to find everything except for his phallus, and for that she made a new one. She brought him back to life long enough to conceive their divine child Horus. And then Osiris went on to be king of the underworld, which for the Egyptians was where all life came from and all treasures were found. And we use dismemberment metaphors in our language all the time. We say we can't get it together, we're falling apart, our hearts are broken, our lives are shattered. We'd give our left arm for something that we really want. And where Osiris and probably everybody else, except for his brother, He thought that his destiny was to be the king of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
His true destiny was to be the king of the underworld. And we all can relate to having our lives come apart as a chance to come together in a new way. That we find our destinies, we end up in places we didn't expect. I thought I would have told you 15 years ago that my destiny was to be a highly credentialed physical therapist. I have a lot of letters after my name. And really, I'll tell you now, like my coming apart showed me that really my destiny is to be much more of a highly credentialed high priestess, or to really show up in that, in that more spiritual way. And if you had asked me if I was going to end up here, even though I'd always done a little bit of alternative stuff, I was still really rooted in science. Like I would have never predicted where I ended up, where I am now that many years ago. And so, I think that's a very relatable experience, I think, for people that, your life falls apart and then you end up in a place that you just never thought you would. And sometimes you get a new job or, after tragedy, people will start a foundation or create a movement or,
right.
Become public speakers on advocates for certain issues and things like that.
Storytelling. Let's get into that.
Yeah.
Storytelling, and I'm going to add branding, all of those things, because I found that one of the things I think is really amazing, and you said it earlier, is we love stories. Humans love stories. We like positive stories, negative stories, stories of accomplishments, stories of failure. We tell each other stories all the time, truth and falsehood.
Yes.
So you have something that I think is very interesting, where you say, or question, which is, why is storytelling so important to transforming the physical body? I'm curious as to your thought pattern behind this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's I think it's, at the end of the day, it's really just that biochemical, neurochemical reaction that we all have to story, because it sits so much more powerfully. Like you get, like oxytocin is the hormone that makes us feel connected with each other. And when you, like if I tell someone, that, or if I'm explaining things to say, well, your vagus nerve is compressed at the base of your skull, and I'm going to do this technique to open it up, and if I ask them, I'm like, well, a few questions about their life, and tell me, if you're being the hero in your own story, or tell me how you're being the hero in your own story, or if you're being the hero in someone else's story, or tell me what you really want. That's when people start crying, and you get the great reactions like that.
Is that a common thing that you do see all the time? People trying to be heroes in somebody else's story?
Absolutely. That's definitely one of the big ones.
Why is it that we try to be the knight in shining armor for somebody else?
Well, I think in my population of women, I think women are very conditioned at some level to do that, because we're the caretakers and we're supporting somebody else's story. We're supporting our spouse's story. We're supporting our children's story. And we're not always taking care of our own story.
I agree.
And so there's a cultural, overlay that, that drives that. Men are much better at being the heroes in their own story.
Really? You think so?
I think, yeah. I mean, much more so than women are.
Okay.
For the most,
all right.
I will say, relatively, I mean, it certainly, I won't say that it's, sometimes the challenge is, and as a, in a business setting, every business wants to be the hero in their customer's story. That's
very true. Very true.
But making sure you're showing up as the right kind of hero, and that you're not trying to be the hero in too many different stories. So, and really knowing what your superpower is in that are all things that give an incredible amount of clarity, because when your heroics and your desires are at odds with each other, it impairs your vision. And you can't see what's going on very clearly. And, but talking to people in metaphor and really making them feel like the metaphor was treated is just, and I think I intuitively, I did this for years without even realizing I was doing it. And there's research on how the linguistics of a doctor affects the outcome of a patient. Like the way a doctor talks to the patient can influence their likelihood of death, just in the way that like they phrase things, negatively and whatnot. And that, when people come, like one of the most powerful experiences I have I've had was with a client that had fibromyalgia, and which is a chronic pain situation, and it can be very difficult to manage. And she told me she felt like a sponge that was full of water and she couldn't wring herself out. So at the end of our session, and if I had given her a twisting exercise, her story was that, twisting increases my pain. Like that's going to make me worse. If I move too much, if I move the wrong way, that's going to hurt more. And what I did I attached some rubber tubing to the door in my office, and I had her just sit facing, like in neutral, facing forward, holding the band, but the band was giving a rotational pull on her, though she was staying in neutral.
Right.
And I just did it to one side, and I said, we're wringing you. This is an exercise to wring you out. And I had her hold it like 3 times for 10 seconds. I was very conservative with her because I didn't know what, I didn't want to upset her condition.
Right.
And she was so much better after that exercise. It was ridiculous. She was able to move so freely by just having the experience of wringing herself out, because that was the problem that she perceived, that treating the metaphor. And so I always ask people what the metaphor is for what's happening to them. Like, what does this feel like to you? Give me, describe it, so that I can, at the very least in my language, reflect back that what I'm doing is addressing that metaphor and restoring it.
I really want to thank Melanie for coming on to the show, and I also want to apologize to her for everybody that's listening. In the beginning, I actually said her name was Melanie Weller in the beginning of the podcast, but her name is Melanie Weller. So I just wanted to make a correction for that and to thank her for coming to the podcast, for coming on here and having such an interesting discussion with us, and really opening our eyes as to our subconscious, or really our consciousness, when it comes to chronic pain, and also explaining a little bit about her work with the vagus nerve and some of the things that it's connected to within our body. So it was such an excellent interview, and there's actually more to that interview. We're either going to put it in a part 2, or we're going to be placing it on our social media for everyone to actually listen to the rest of it. So once we decide where we're going to place that, it will be everybody will be notified. We'll probably putting it on our social media so people can hear the rest of the interview, because it was such a very interesting conversation. I also would like to thank all of the listeners out there for bearing with me and the ups and downs that the show has been going through. As I stated before, there's just so much going on. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and they were saying, listen, with everything that you do, with all the things that you're doing, all the people that you're trying to help, whether it's your family or friends, and all the things you're trying to do, be nice to yourself. And actually also in a conversation with Tiffany Wynn, who is a life coach and a spiritual coach as well. She was on the show recently, and she said, one of the things we need to also always focus on, no matter what's going on in life, all the constant changes, especially now because there's so many fast, rapid changes,
whether it's what's going on in the media, what's going on politically, what's going on health-wise. The thing of it is that we have to take each thing and deal with it is that we can control. And she was like, the only thing that we can truly control is our responses. It's how we deal with certain situations and the present. You can't think about how you're going to deal with the future. You can prepare, but even with that, you don't know how you're going to respond to what's taking place until it takes place. We can theorize, we can practice. It's like anything. It's like if you are a fighter, you can be in the gym practicing all the moves and doing all the road work that you need to, but you're never going to really know how you're going to respond until that first hit lands. And that's what it's really about. And I just want to take the time out for everybody who has been patient to listen to the show, because there's so much going on and I'm wearing so many different hats, and also those who are helping me are wearing so many different hats. So I just want to thank you out there to all of my supporters and everybody that is just so patient and listening to the show and just like, hey, listen, we understand. And those of you who come back to listen, because this is not easy. When you have a goal, when you have a dream, when you're trying to make progression, obstacles are consistently in your way, and they're there for a reason. It's no different than physical training. It's really no different. It's truly no different. Why? Because the thing of it is that in order to build strength, you need resistance. And that's what this is all about. In the grand scheme of things, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's political ideology, whether it is health, these are obstacles in the way of humanity to make us stronger, to build character. And it forces us to look at ourselves and say, okay, all right, what are you going to do? What are you going to do in the long run? How are you going to react to this? Are you going to take a positive look at it? Are you going to panic? What's going to take place? What are you doing? I'm dealing with a mother who is dealing with some health issues at this point. I'm dealing with a father who is in his 80s. I'm dealing with relatives who have other issues as well, health-wise. It's a lot. And I share this not to get sympathy. I share this not to put my business out there, so to speak, but I share it because of the fact of all of the things I'm working towards, all the goals I'm working towards. Life continuously takes place, and it's all in how you look at it, and it's not easy. But I'm sharing this also for others out there who are working towards a goal and who need to hear that there's somebody else, there's others like you out there. There are others who are struggling, who are working hard, who are climbing that long hill upwards. Others that are trying to progress. No, let me not say try. Others who are progressing. Because to quote Yoda, I think it's whether you do or I love this quote, but I always screw it up, so bear with me, everybody, in my nerdish ways. I think is do or do not. I think it's do or do not. You are both right. Something to that, it's something to that effect. I'll get it, but basically, I butchered that whole quote, by the way. But basically, what I'm trying to say is the fact of the power is in your hands. The only one that can stop you is you. We were blessed with the ability for 100% greatness. We can accomplish so many different things, so much. We limit ourselves. We are the limiting factor in our success, us and our understanding. So if we choose to not have a ceiling, if we choose to not have any boundaries to our creative thought, our prosperity, our progression, our positivity, then guess what? There will be no boundaries. If we can teach that to the next generation, there will be no boundaries. But if we allow ourselves to be encapsulated by the boundaries of fear, by the boundaries of others who want to stop our greatness, whether it's because they can't reach it, whether it's because they don't want to be left behind, whether it's because they're jealous of it, no matter what, if we allow ourselves to be stuck in that mindset, then guess what? At the end of the day, it's our fault. It's nobody else's fault but ours. And that's the whole greater battle that we are dealing with. We are dealing with the mental battle of, will you progress to your greater self, or will you be pulled down? Whether it's a pandemic, whether it's political, whether it is health, whether it's financial, no matter what's going on, it all deals with you. I think Melanie was saying earlier, she was talking about, are you being the hero in your own story, or are you being the hero in someone else's? That's a powerful statement. How many of you out there are the hero in somebody else's life or somebody else's story, but not the hero in yours? Think about that. And while you do, if you find yourself that the answer is yes, I am being the hero in somebody else's story, take some time out to think about what you can do about that. Maybe it's you want to reach out to Melanie and ask her some questions. Maybe you want to ask some questions here. Maybe you want to talk about that here on the De La Fit podcast. Well, guess what? You can do that. You can do that. If you're on Anchor, or if you have the Anchor app, you can actually leave your questions on the app, and we will read them. You'll be a part of the show itself, or you can contact us at delafit13@gmail.com. If that's difficult to remember, you can go to our website, which is www.delafitpodcast.com. Reach out to us there. We always look forward to hearing from our listeners and our supporters out there, and please reach out to us. Or if you're a social media guru and you like to connect through social media, you can reach us on Facebook at De La Fit Podcast. We are on Instagram at DE_LA_Fit Podcast. And on Twitter, we are available at De La Fit Podcast. So, with that being said, my good friends, we are going to end this podcast excursion for today. Also, be prepared. Yes, the Roku. For many of you out there who are still interested and still like, what's going on with the Roku? Yes, we had some technical difficulties with the Roku, but we are at this point loading content up. So hopefully before the end, I'm saying basically in the middle of February, you will be able to go on to Roku and see the content that we have been filming. I'm looking forward to that. I'm hoping it's going to be amazing. It is going to be amazing. I'm actually confident of a lot of the content that we have created, and you will be able to view that and see all of the wonderful interviews that we have conducted. Also, we will be streaming on Facebook as well as other platforms coming soon. We will be streaming on Instagram as well. We are we're in the processes of tacking down those moments right there and getting that all taken care of. But so much going on, so much to talk about, but we're going to leave all of that for another conversation. Please tune in next week at our normal time on Friday at 1:00 p.m. when the De La Fit podcast will be back at its regular scheduled time. We thank you all for tuning in. As always, be happy, be healthy, and please love yourself. Peace.
Peace.
You've been listening to the DelaFit podcast. Ta-ta for now.